Welcome into the BuiltOnAir podcast. We are in episode 7 of season 22. Good to be back with you. It's Tuesday morning, myself, Ali, and Camille, and we are joined by Christiana. Welcome, Christiana.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Nice to have you with us. We'll learn more about her story later in the show. I'll first walk us through what we're going to be talking about today. We'll start with our Around the Bases and all the updates and news and what's going on in Airtable and the different communities. Then we will have a sponsorship by On2Air and On2Air Backups. And then we'll learn about Christiana, sorry I spelled your name wrong there, Dominguez, and her background and story and what she's been up to and how she found Airtable. And then she's going to show us a base that she has worked with at the YMCA where she volunteers, and how it's helping the youth prepare for leadership and whatnot. And then shout out to Join Our Community, and then we'll wrap it up with a segment from Camille on brand new feature updated timelines that just came out last week. So with that, Around the Bases, let's jump in. First, give a shout out to Nelson Wang, who runs the partner group at Airtable. They were just announced that they won the Partner Program of the Year award from Partnership Leaders. So congrats to Nelson and Kim and Sam and the team there at Airtable. They do a great job. And I've appreciated working with them as a partner. And so I just want to give a shout out to them on that award. Well deserved. Okay, here's one for the technical audience. Airtable has an engineering blog that's pretty interesting, and every couple months they post something, and I like it. They give some insights into how things work under the hood. And so here it talks about their Kubernetes environment and how it works. And sometimes we take for granted like how complex under the hood Airtable is, with all the different bases and all the automations, everything going on, and data syncing. I can't imagine like having to manage all that and doing upgrades. And sometimes there's outages. I think last week there was a outage for a bit. But it's a complex environment to keep up and running.
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to understand how to architect the backend that is Airtable. And the outages are always interesting because it's much like all of the businesses, myself included, that kind of run on Airtable. Airtable runs on other businesses themselves. So if they go down, Airtable goes down, and then we go down. So it's kind of like it could be a number of different things that could be going wrong. And then just this chart alone kind of makes evident how complex the Airtable's piece of the puzzle is.
Yeah. Yep. So they rely heavily on Amazon. They're all in AWS, and so definitely dependent on Amazon. There are many companies. So yeah, if you'd like to dig under the hood, check out that blog post. Okay, some big news. They announced 5x cheaper for the Airtable AI tokens. Probably still is a black box, but it's a smaller black box to understand the costs.
I'm still so lost. I'm so confused.
Here we go. Understanding credit tables. Let's see. Does this help?
Probably not.
New credits each AI action will use.
Oh.
So this is new. Okay. You can use this preview. So where is the preview?
It shows it at the bottom of like a long text field. It shows it at the very bottom.
Yeah, they within the product.
Okay. Very good.
But then it doesn't actually show you how much it did use. It shows how much
An estimate.
Yeah, it just estimates, and that's not necessarily like, you could have different lengths on different records all in there, and I would just love a log of like this many credits went to this.
Yeah, I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still waiting for a log of how many API calls you used last month, and I don't think that exists either. So does it? I don't think so.
Oh, Airtable. It's the little things. I know we just talked about how complicated it is to build and maintain an application such as Airtable, but at the same time, I'd like to see some running totals of the stuff that I'm paying for. That'd be nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it is complicated because even, it depends on what model you're running and all sorts of factors. And even those models, like, it's all dependent on the input. They should be able to show the log, and so that you can see that for sure. Yeah, that's tricky because they got to get that log information from their provider.
Yeah.
Parse it out.
Yeah.
But it is good news overall. It's cheaper, so that's good.
That is very good.
Yeah. Probably not good. Last week we had on the AI app that one of their big selling points was being cheaper than Airtable's. It still was a cool app how it worked, but not as advantageous on that front now. Okay, next one. We're going to talk about this, but just highlight enhanced Gantt timeline. That's what Camille's going to walk us through later in the show. So that's nice. They're improving the timeline interface. So we'll dive deep into what that means and what you get later on. So stick around. Okay, next one. Shout out to Max. He's been on the show a few times. Today, in an hour or 2 hours, we'll be doing a spotlight on how he's helped Atlantic Records UK and doing a demo there.
It's actually Thursday.
Oh, Thursday. That's right.
Mhm.
So you got 2 days to get ready for it. Very good. Next one, a new button. So this is a new feature, not posted in their what's new section. So now it says when you want to unlock a view, instead of unlocking it, you could duplicate it as a personal view. Good, bad, useful?
I think it's decent. There's a lot of times where we set up views that sync out to other bases, and so we lock them once we set them up. And if it's not a complicated table, you might just have 2 views, grid view and then the one that syncs. And for people a little less familiar with our practices, they might think, oh, I'll just do a quick filter on this one because it's the first one that pops up. And this button will kind of help guide people to say, I'm not saying you can't set a filter, but you can't do it here. Make your own view and do all the filtering you want.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. Like if I'm going to unlock a view, it's because I need to modify that view.
Mm-hmm.
If I would duplicate it or whatever. So I don't know. I haven't used that option yet. But yeah, Ben says it'd be nice to have an auto timer to where you unlock it and then it locks itself after 30 minutes or something.
I think it should lock when you leave. When it notices you've navigated away, Airtable keeps track of what the active view is or the active table. And if you leave, that's why Chrome and Firefox and all the other browsers have multiple tabs.
Yeah.
Go to a different tab, but if you go within that same base to a different table, I think it should automatically lock the view.
That's a good idea. Yep, that could work. Justin agrees. Leave and lock. Okay, next one. This one's coming from Reddit. This is kind of a cool little hack. So a free way to export Airtable to Excel Google Sheets with images. So this is kind of nice. And so basically you export everything as a CSV and that will give you a JSON representation of the image, but it won't give you like the URL itself. So here's a formula you can put inside of your Google Sheet to extract it and then actually display the image. Now, I will say that image has a timeout associated with it. So over time, but I think it might just, I don't know if it just displays it or does it import the image. So here's the picture. I think it just displays it. So these are going to time out at some point. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's kind of cool. Little hack. Try that.
Helpful for migration tasks.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Back to the Airtable community. This is a cool new product out there. Crust AI. You can check it out. Tricust.ai. I started to play with it. I still need to evaluate this more. But it's kind of building mini apps called snippets. It's all built on top of Airtable. So the data stays in Airtable. It does have editable fields. So you can build different apps. I think it might be geared towards mobile, but I think you can do web as well. So new front interface builder, top of Airtable. Check that out.
And the user interface looks pretty nice and clean for all the examples you scrolled through. I am reminded of when Airtable changed the name of blocks the second time. And in the Airtable community, I remember one thread was just, how do you define an app? And it felt very existential. And the word snippet makes me think, here's another word. Yeah, we could have just said app. Yeah, true. Here's another app posted in Reddit, FlexiPage. So if you're still looking for a way to generate PDFs, this one's in the marketplace. So it actually runs inside an extension. So you can check that out. There's similar options out there as well. And yeah, here's one more. So Airtable has recently publicly demonstrated extensions are coming to interfaces. Who knows when, but eventually. And this feels like something that would be very interesting to see moved over to the interface side, because printing in Airtable has always been not great. In brief, not great. And I like seeing more and more options to generate your own PDFs. Some of them are very intricate, where you can make hyper designed pages, and other ones give you sort of the bare bones. Can't really tell how custom you can get with this one, but I would be interested in seeing things like this and some of the other ones in the world where we're finally extensions within interfaces.
Yeah. Speaking of which, there was another post on that specific topic. A new video came out a couple days ago from Airtable. Philip gives a demo walkthrough and kind of showcases how he built it. I watched this video. Did you guys watch it?
No. So I know I just said that. I was thinking of the other announcement. I haven't seen this yet.
Okay. Yeah. There was one we showed. So this is one he actually goes through the process of building an extension and how he vibe codes it. So vibe code's kind of the concept of using AI to generate your code. And he does mention he does it all in Cursor, so outside of Airtable, but he mentions they're going to make it to where you can use the AI inside of Airtable. And so I don't know, they're going to build their own code editor or something similar to a Bolt or Lovable.
That seems like a folly. I don't know why they would invest in that, given the complexity. Whatever. I do like that you could do it from Cursor, though, because that means you could also write your own code. And if you wanted to use AI, you could.
Right.
So far, I kind of like this approach, and I also appreciate Airtable's commitment to their standard, like fake company they use all in marketing is a shoe warehouse. So a 3D shoe viewer is how they've described whatever app that Philip is building, and I don't know, commitment.
Yeah. It's actually turned out pretty cool. They got a 3D viewer of their shoes. It's pulling from Airtable. One cool thing that he showed right up in here, so you can have different view types. I'll go back to the original. Let's see here. Yeah. Okay. So you can have the standard one. So, and then it's just in the drop down, there's a custom, and then the custom takes over everything underneath. So that's how custom extensions work.
I was not expecting that. That is very interesting.
I hope you can change the word custom to something else.
Yeah. Because you could build multiple extensions. Right. So which one is which?
You may not be able to, just like you can't have multiple gallery views.
Right.
Same page, you'd have to create another page.
Yeah.
But I assume they let you redeploy one custom extension in multiple places is what I mean, in that, like, I have developed multiple extensions and they all have different names. So in the drop down, I would like to know what I'm switching to. Just,
Yeah. I think it would be associated with this page. So
right.
Yeah.
That's silly. Airtable. I've seen your SDK. That's not how you wrote it originally.
So here you see, so this is the configuration. So it has the develop, and so assuming this develop is going to bring up a text editor similar to their script editor.
Right.
One last thing. I know we have other stuff. Their documentation for the extensions for interfaces, it does imply that you have to go to Builder Hub to create a new extension. And if you've used extensions within the last few years or so, or developed your own extensions within the last few years or so in Builder Hub, you have the option of like giving it a name and a description and whatnot. So I'm kind of trying to reconcile them saying you have to make it from Builders Hub and it being dedicated to a page, like the first page you develop it on is the only one it can live in, which is how blocks used to be written, and then they updated it. So I hope we're not sliding backwards, because I would be annoyed.
Yeah, I don't see a name field to give it a name.
Boo.
So yeah, we'll see how that evolves. But regardless, excited. This definitely is a game changer in what it can unlock. So yeah, they said that they started rolling it out to people on the waiting list. I did not make the cut. I'm on the waiting list and did not get an invite, but they said this week they started giving access. So we're seeing.
Sure hope this isn't for enterprise only.
Yeah.
See.
All right, staying on kind of the similar realm. If you are a Cursor user, if you know what it is, Visual Studio Code is actually backed by Microsoft. They just announced that they're open sourcing their AI editor, which is an interesting move, which is powered by GitHub Copilot. And so they're going after, I think, the news between Windsurf getting acquired by OpenAI and the progress that Cursor's made. They're realizing they got to catch up. GitHub Copilot was probably the first major one to enter, and then they kind of got passed up. So they've got some catching up to do. So they're going to open source it. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, that concludes our Around the Bases. Get you everything that you need to know, up to date and news. Let us know if we missed anything. With that, if you are running your business on Airtable, it's best practice to make sure your data is backed up outside of Airtable. That's where OnToAir comes in. We back up your data to Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive. That includes your data, your attachments, your schema information, and allows for also restore functionality. So for a quick, I wanted to show somebody on Reddit posted, if Airtable goes down, my whole business goes down. What do I do? Now, backups doesn't allow you to run, without Airtable. I don't think there is a way, even if your data is backed up to Airtable, you can get back up and running without Airtable being there. But it does give you peace of mind that at least your data is not lost with Airtable if it were to go down. So this is something every business should think about. If you're dependent on Airtable, backups is the first thing that you should be thinking about. Then there might be other things that you might do to have redundancy in your workflows. But OnToAir is the best place to start for that. So that's how people think about it. Okay. With that, Christiana Dominguez, I'm going to put you up on the middle, learn a little bit about you.
Hi. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay, we're excited to have you here as well. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So share a little bit about myself.
Yeah, that would be great. I know you've been around for a couple of years. I first met you at Airtable in, was it 2023, I think, in San Francisco?
Yeah, it must have been in San Francisco, yeah.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you on the show. And how long have you been using Airtable for?
I have been using Airtable. I'm trying to remember what year I was a reluctant initial Airtable user, which is a story I use with other people I'm trying to get to merge onto Airtable. Because I'm like, Google Sheets and Forms. I don't know. What are you talking about? I'm fine. We don't need anything else. And so I think I had some friends who spent 2 years going like, this is better. You should use this. And I didn't want to learn new things, which I find is a common, unfortunate adult characteristic. But I finally saw the light. So I've probably been using it for, I don't know, at least 8 or 9 years at this point. In my world of sort of educators and volunteers, I am an Airtable expert, and then I went to Airtable and was like, oh, I don't know anything. I'm as far on the no code side of things as humanly possible. So I probably left that event going with a little bit of a Wayne's World, I'm not worthy vibe, but we're able to do pretty good things with it. So the main entry point for me was using it to manage a youth program, and now it definitely runs like most aspects of my life, from menu planning to just really keeping track of everything. So I am highly dependent on it now, and bristle at Google Sheets or email attachments or anything else. So I've fully consumed all of the necessary Kool-Aid at this point. And someday I'll learn to code a little bit, and then I'll be totally unstoppable. But yeah, so our main use of this, and kind of what I'm here to talk about today, is our YMCA Youth and Government program. So this exists actually in 37 states throughout the country. I'm based in California, so my view is like focusing on what we do here. The program's been around nationwide since 1948. And our motto is that democracy must be learned by each generation, which I think has always been important, but at a time when there seems to be renewed interest in like how our institutions of government do or are supposed to work, it feels especially important. And so our program goal is to raise the next generation of civically engaged Californians, specifically for us, which really just means kids who grow up to be voters, who are active in their communities, who like read a newspaper ever, maybe who know what a newspaper is these days, or like what is a credible solution, and value servant leadership, like specifically as a model. So we do this by teaching kids practical skills like research and media literacy, leadership lessons, ensure they know the basics of like civics, knowledge, awareness, engagement, like what to do and where the levers are to pull to build whatever they want to build, right? We're not a partisan program. We just want to teach you how government is supposed to function and how democracy is supposed to function. And then it's up to them to figure out like, what do they want that to look like, hopefully throughout their lives. So on the tactical side of things, we do this by meeting in local groups. We call them delegations. There's about 64 of them statewide. That's down from pre-pandemic when we have like 85, but we're still getting back into the swing of things still. We have 2 conferences a year, which is where Airtable like really comes into its own for us. We have a training conference on the Army base in the middle of California, and then we have our full model legislature and court, which takes place here in Sacramento. So we're the hometown crowd for that, which is pretty cool. And the kids have to model all aspects of government. So they make their own legislature and they have their own courts, and they just it's one really big dorky role-playing game for high school students, but you're role-playing like government. So they're just LARPing all over the place. They just don't really know it. Like 5 of them know what that is. The rest of them are clueless, but that's what they're doing. And they're not there on their own, right? Because that would be crazy to have 2,000 teenagers unsupervised. So there's like 400 adults that are there. I'm one of those adults trying to help them make good choices. And so that created a couple of problems. Like if our main motto, is to make sure that democracy is learned by each generation. So the 2 problems that flow out of that when you're trying to manage them is really our first charge as the adults is how do we keep these 2,000 kids safe while they're learning about stuff. Supervision, just like looking at them, is the best way to do that. So how do we know where they are or where they're supposed to be or what they're doing? And then the second and related problem is focused on like the substance rather than the people management. So how do we make sure everyone has access to the resources we develop, like so that everyone's kind of learning or has the ability to learn the same things at meetings when we're all across the state for most of the time when we only come together at these 2 different points. And there has to be, whatever solution we find for that has to be exceedingly low cost because we're a nonprofit and this is a program for students. So if we could charge like $10,000 a kid, maybe we would just be paying CVent to organize everything for us, but that's not the case. And it has to be mobile friendly. And so once upon a time we used Google Sheets, and then can I share my screen now? I'll walk through some of this.
Sure. Yeah. And that's funny. That was going to be my next question was, were you on a different program before switching to Airtable?
Yeah. So like when I started, so I've been working with this program for close to 20 years. And when I first started, it was like an Excel spreadsheet and a hard copy piece of paper, and you had to like write kids' names down. And it worked in that time, it was fine. And then with the advent of Google Sheets, we moved to that and Google Forms, and that was okay. But you had a lot of people who didn't really know how to use it. There would be like one person who knew what a VLOOKUP was and nobody else did, and people would frequently break it. So you'd go to the public roster and you'd see this most of the time. Or you'd have, copy of, and you didn't know who or like what was the actual one we were supposed to be using. And so it didn't work well. It worked better than paper, but it didn't really work well enough to be a full management system. And so when I finally listened to my friends who were saying there's something better, I first implemented Airtable locally just with my group of delegates. And the breakthrough for me there was really its mobile capabilities. So the fact that I could have in my pocket, and I think I don't have that screen ready, but the fact that I could just the mobile interface of the basic app, no special interfaces, no nothing, however many years ago, was fantastic. Because being able to pull up a list of kids, being able to have their picture in there, so that I could walk into a room and say like, whose faces should I see, or using it like a photo lineup, like show me who was rude to you. and being able to call them or their mom directly from that app was a game changer. And then it took another couple of years to actually get statewide buy-in on this concept. So we really, the pandemic helped us finally like bite the bullet and move. Obviously in 2020, or actually in 2020 itself, we had our statewide conference like at the middle of February. So we were able to get that in before COVID was a thing. But then going into the following year, when we couldn't meet in person, we weren't going to have any statewide conferences, we had to find some way to administer this program, sort of asynchronously, and also get to people where they were. So what that turned into was the first time that we created, we had two separate bases. We had a curriculum base where we could put all of our resources, all of our meeting resources. One thing that helped win people over was the ability to have attachments directly in the database itself. So this was kind of the first thing we were able to roll out to people and that they were willing to learn how to use, because it was easy for both the adult advisors who were trying to do things on Zoom and the students to find things. And then because this was like the pre-interface era, we also used sync bases to create a public roster. So we were able to share information in a way that kept student info safe, because we didn't really want to be sharing like phone numbers and email addresses of minors around the internet. So we could use sync bases to get that information in front of the rest of the program, and you could look things up and look at your work product and find people easily there. So so that was the first time we really were able to get statewide buy-in. That was kind of what I'd say, iteration 2 of my use of Airtable with the program. And then during the COVID era and the year after, we moved sort of a hybrid model, so people were meeting locally, but the conferences were still online. That's when the first time we tried out interfaces, which worked okay when everybody was online, but weren't really a solution when we were back in person, because they weren't mobile friendly at that point, and they still aren't the most mobile friendly, especially if you're an Android user, which I am, and enough of our participants are that they were really hobbled. I will say, side note, the best aspect of our year where our conferences were online and we were using interfaces was forcing everybody to join Airtable. And we are still, I'm still powering a lot of what I do off the credits that we earn for forcing a couple thousand people to use the referral link for that. So that's great. But long-term, that interfaces were not really the solution that we needed them to be. So the next iteration, I'd say like iteration 4, but probably like 20 in reality, was learning about and using Pori. So I think I learned about Pori at Airtable in 2023. I had only really looked at like the Airtable universe itself and not all of the fun things you can do with third-party apps. And so playing around with Pori really unlocked Airtable in a way that we could have people connect with our resources more easily, because it was a lot to remind people where things were, right? You had to go to the interface for some stuff, but then there's some info still on a public roster and there are too many places. So now we have everything. Our base is a one-stop shop. So we have all of our curriculum, and we have our roster information in one base. But where people interact with that primarily is on our Pori website, which we still use the Pori.app address. So we kind of refer to it just as the Pori within the program rather than the website. And this is where we are now. It's not the most attractive homepage, which is solely my responsibility, but we might improve that for next year. But what that gave everybody, again, was an in-your-pocket single source of information that worked really well for us. And so some of the things that have helped us kind of level up is we're able to save on a lot of printing costs because we have a conference schedule that's online. that's searchable and filterable, and now is not going to load because I'm trying to show it to people. I'll blame, that's probably my internet and not Corey's fault, but it's relatively, it's a relatively basic, there's nothing here that's gonna win any design awards, but it does what we need it to do, which is it makes it easy for our students and the adults to look up and see where they need to be and when. We like that we can embed forms here. We have, we encourage people to send kudos, which is basically like an attaboy or attagirl to somebody else, telling them they're doing a good job. And it's just nice to have one address and not have to explain, like, go to this table and go to this view to find the thing that you're looking for. Some of our, I think, most helpful resources here are, should I make it a different page? Our students write student authored legislation, and so we're able to have all of those, the actual bill language on here. That's all viewable. What they're what they're writing, what they're debating when they're together, has their information. We've got legislative analysts and lobbyists who have to write reports, and so again, all this is in their pockets. So we're not printing as many papers, and everybody has access to it. And because Pori is mobile on both iOS and Android, everybody can use it all the time, and they're not really worried about logging in and out of things or trying to get that back-end access. And then we have lots of resources for adults as well. My favorite being the Kid Finder 3000, which helps us know where every single kid is supposed to be at all times. So if you can't find them, if you need to get to somebody, you can look up the rooms they're supposed to be in. There's quite an array of, the reason that relational database is key is you've got a student, and a student has a program area, and they have a delegation, and they have a hotel room, and they have all these categories, right? So, so being able to tie everybody together really makes it easier for the adults to do what they need to do to find them and keep them safe. So some of these are protected, so only adults can access this. That has the student, or has the phone number for the person who's supposed to be in charge of them. It does technically, not on this view that I'm sharing here, but it has the student's contact information as well. So adults can try to get to them if they need to. And then we still have all of our resources on here as well, so that you can look up your meeting curriculum or whatever it is that you need to get to share. We have our calendar, and we have all kinds of stuff. A lot of this is, of course, that's filtered because we're done with the program here. Some of this is, of course, leading a horse to water and trying to get them to drink, but nobody can say that we don't have the resources available to them, because everything is on here. It got really high remarks. We included questions about this resource in our program surveys for the year. And people definitely appreciated having that one place to go to see everything. And so this helps us deliver on our program mission, because we can be sure that everyone has access to the same information at the same time. It's correct, so you're not worried if you're looking at the wrong Google sheet at any point in time. And it's doing all those things that we love in a relational database, where you're just changing, one thing one time in the right table, and it's populating everywhere it needs to go. I'd say the main challenge we have with using a platform like Pori that's not native to Airtable is I still forget that if you're updating like a field name and you're just dealing with the interface, when you update it in the base, it's going to update on the interface. And if you update it in the base here, it's just going to break your Pori page, and then you have to go in and reconfigure that. But as long as we remember that, we do pretty well with keeping everything up to date. So that is how we use Airtable and Pori.
I'm curious, are you the main one still managing it all, or do you have other people helping out?
I'm not the only one. I am one of the main ones, but we do have we do have staff adoption. So I'm a volunteer, and I kind of, my first responsibility is to my local kids, but I've been around so long that I do a lot of stuff at the statewide level as well. So I work really closely with the handful of paid staff that work on this out of the YMCA, out of a YMCA in Southern California. So it's definitely not only me, but that is the other advantage is enough people now know the basics of Airtable that they can go in and like add the resources, update them, and then it's going to populate over here without anyone having to know how to like code a website or update a website or whatever. So once everybody kind of understood, like my really bad analogy is that Airtable is a broadcasting studio, and Pori is just the television set that you're tuning to like a particular feed. And so getting people to understand you don't actually have to touch Pori at all. You just need to update Airtable and broadcast what you want, and it's gonna don't worry, it's gonna take care of it. So I do a lot with it, but I'm not the only one, thankfully.
Nice.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like people like that's kind of often the turning point for people is when they realize like, oh, like we changed our phone number and I don't need to go to 6 pages on my website and forget about the other 3 inevitably until 2 years later and someone says it's wrong and you're like,
Exactly.
Oh, I just changed one field and it's all the way out there, which is awesome.
Exactly. That's, I mean, probably the other biggest challenge we have with Pori is sometimes how do we structure some stuff on the back end so that works? Because there definitely is a place, for just like a block of text, to be in there. But then you have to remember you have to go back and update the block of text. So there's these links that are in here, like the public roster link and whatnot. We do have to update that each year. And so we're getting close to the point this summer where we're going to start rolling everything over and like building out next year's space and figuring out the best way to do that. And I think what we're going to do going into this next year is instead of what we've done every year is we clone the base, we give it a new name, we have to remap everything. And so I think this year what we might do is not the primary base might just like survive on its own. And then we'll make a copy to archive the data, so we're not going back through to like re-update all of the links. But it's still so much better than anything that we had before that required way more like hand massaging to get it up to date.
Absolutely.
Very cool. That's cool stuff. Is it fair to say if you hadn't built this, you probably wouldn't have a solution?
Yeah, no, we wouldn't. Yeah, we would still be using just like a shared Google Drive and hoping people could guess the right name for things or control F their way to whatever resources they needed. Nothing else was as workable, and also nothing else was as fast. So if you had a website and you're relying on like the wise tech people, then you got to submit a ticket and wait 2 weeks for the website to be updated, and by that time the conference is over. So here we can quickly change, if we have to change a room assignment or the time or add a new session or whatever, it's almost instantaneous, to get that information there. Whereas before it was like you were depending on some group needs and some text strings and some remind text, and like maybe the kids would know that it was changed, but here, just the speed and the ease with which stuff can be updated. I don't think there's anything else that could replicate that, especially in a way that we could afford, because that's the other handicap. There are full service conference management software things out there, but I think for someone like us, this is where kind of software as a service is not the best model, because if we were paying for like seats and everyone to do stuff generally, as attendees, we wouldn't be able to afford to do that either. So this is the best way. It gives us the most functionality, customization at a price point that we can afford, because we only need a handful of like back-end Teams users. We do bump it up to business for our conferences so we don't run out of API calls to Pori. That's why it would be really great if Airtable added something to check to see how many, like, I don't know actually how many API calls were used. I'm pretty sure we'd bust 100,000 if we have a lot of pages and we've got 2,000 people at the conference. I think that maths out pretty quick, but I don't really know. So just to make sure nothing breaks, we do have to bump it up and then bump it down again in between. So
very cool. Thank you for sharing that. It's awesome to see how it's being used and helping the next generation. Might be introducing the kids as well to this technology.
yeah, we try. I try to get them. We have a local. I also have another Pori app page, whatever you want to call it. I don't know the question about like how do you define an app. I don't what we have to call everything apps now. We can't call them websites. I'm not really sure. I don't know the difference. That's the number one complaint I get actually is that this is a website and not an app, and I'm not entirely sure what the difference is. Because I show them how to put a shortcut on their like phone desktop, and that still is not magical enough for them. But yeah, we introduced them my local leadership team that learns how to run stuff on the back end a little bit more. So hopefully I'm giving them extra tools to manage their life going forward.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, with that, bring up. We're going to move on. And before we do, if you are not in our Built on Air community, we want you to join us. BuiltOnAir.com/join gets you in with thousands of other Airtable fans and users talking daily about the latest and helping each other out. So check it out. BuiltOnAir.com/join gets you into our community in Slack. We also have a newsletter that keeps you up to date on everything. And subscribe to our YouTube channel as well and any other socials that you want to connect with us on. And let's learn about the new updated timelines. Camille. There you go.
Yep. So this is a update to timelines and interfaces, specifically allowing you to show more fields on the left-hand side of the screen when you're in Gantt mode. So Airtable gives a little description of what this update was. I couldn't understand it, so I'm going to walk through what it actually is myself. This is an interface. Go ahead.
I was saying I couldn't understand that either from the description.
Me either. Yeah.
It's worded interestingly. So before I kind of get started, I checked in the base view. So Airtable has a timeline and a Gantt view if you're looking at it in the data view. And this feature, as far as I can tell, is not available on either the timeline or the Gantt from the data view. But from the interface, which is what I'm looking now, if I start editing, and I'll collapse that down. The thing that was updated. So first things first, if you're on a full page design like I am, you want to click into the timeline itself. And then second, you want to make sure that you flip over to the layout being Gantt versus stacked. So the difference between these just in general, and this part is not new, if you're in stacked, records will appear like this. So they'll fit neatly across, linear time if they can like a slot without overlapping each other. For this to be available, you kind of have to be in Gantt view where each of the records is its own line. So the part that's new, if we go into any of these records that are on the Gantt view, you'll see I have certain fields that are visible as available in this pop-up. What was added was for the ability to have these fields also appear to the left. So what I'm going to do is turn on this toggle, show all visible fields on the left. And if I do that, I now have the ability to sort of drag this out, and then I can see all of the fields, and it kind of scrolls as one unit. So assignee, start, deadline are all over here, as well as status. You can make these wider or more narrow as need be to get this to display however you need. I have found that it's best on larger screens. So if I go into preview to get rid of the right-hand sidebar, I feel like I would personally have to have a pretty wide screen for this to be as useful as I'd like, to have more than, I'd say, 3 fields visible. Like status I can see, assignee I can kind of see with a little bit of scrolling, but I personally wouldn't have that many fields turned on because you literally wouldn't see them. But that was the update. So these are, if you've turned on editability, these are editable. So I can go in and adjust any of the fields that I have visible, including date fields, if it's based on that date field for this Gantt view. It kind of jumps around as you make those edits. So not ultra clean in terms of user experience, but it is nice that you can edit from here as well as editing from here, whichever I guess is your preference.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then
I think
for those who prefer light mode, I'll show it in light mode as well. It might be a little easier to see.
so. If you dragged the mid cursor, I mean, you could basically essentially get a list view on the left.
Mm-hmm.
So how far can that go? Just halfway?
Yeah, it looks to be about halfway.
Oh, really? It doesn't go all the way.
Mm-mm.
Because one thought I had is one of the cool features of a Gantt or a timeline is the ability to go into the settings for the timeline.
Yep.
Is the ability to split multiple values into groups.
Yep.
And you can't get that on a normal list view. So I was like, that might be one way to kind of get that feature of a list.
Mm-hmm. You can't do it on a Gantt either.
Oh.
So I don't know how long this has been the case, but switching to Gantt view disables quite a few features.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't do that, splitting multiple values into groups, and you also can't stack labels vertically, which I guess makes sense because it would start interfering with the row below it. But you also can't change the height of the rows either. So I don't know why you can't do that.
Interesting.
Seems like it would be easier to have record heights if everything was its own dedicated line, but what do I know?
Yeah.
I just wish dependencies were easier in Airtable.
Yeah. So the benefit of using a Gantt view is supposed to be the dependency thing, which are what these lines are here. All of these, this is from a template that Airtable provided. So these dependencies are already in there, but the lines in between each of these records mean if I put this back, I could have certain settings that automatically shift anything that's dependent on that record for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's still, there's some things I think that are missing to make it as smooth as possible.
Can you draw lines between records here to create the dependency? Okay.
You can. You kind of have to hover. This is probably a bad example because these are the tiniest possible records. But if I'll just get rid of that. If you hover your cursor towards the sort of bottom right of a record, you kind of get this dot that's visible, and then you can drag it to all the way to the left of a record. I believe you could also do it from the other direction. No, you can't. I lied. So you're dragging from the parent to the child, basically.
Okay. That I almost feel like is easier than actually setting them up in the linked record fields because it's just a mess. I mean, now with actually, no, does dynamic filtering work with self-linked tables? I don't think it does. I don't know. I'm going down a rabbit hole now in my own head, but
that might have to be its own its own set of tests.
Yeah.
We should do another segment because I found another limitation of self-table linked records that I wasn't aware of this week.
What was that?
You can't two-way data sync linked records that link to themselves. I wasn't aware of that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. For whatever reason, Airtable decided that if you also Airtable, if you switch to dark mode, it doesn't immediately switch all of your other tabs. At some point, Airtable decided that linking between tables gives you all the features in the world, but linking a project, or in this case, a project to another project, refuses to give you like half the bells and whistles that a really relational database is supposed to give you.
Mhm.
I don't know why. It's been like that for a decade, and they haven't changed it.
From the get-go, yeah. Yep. So yeah, that was something we ran into. Very cool. That's interesting. So it's a good gives you something to play with there.
Yeah, I think in general, this is pretty useful if you want like a sort of high level and your timeline isn't like ultra dense, I would say, with information, because if I have the data here, it's also going to show up here, and that can get a little bit I don't know, cluttered, in my opinion. But it again, this is toggleable. So if you don't want to have the information on the left-hand side, you don't have to have it there. You could just turn it off, and then it kind of doesn't repeat itself on the screen. I do wish I had the option of saying, if I have it on the left, I don't want it hovering over the record. Maybe just the name gets carried over, and that's it. Just so that I can sort of have a cleaner way of looking at all of my information.
Or some fields you might want on the left, but not all the ones that you want on the pop-up.
Yeah, that would also be nice, because when you're selecting your fields, you have these sort of icons that appear that, you can hide it, or you can edit the field directly, see its settings. If they could add another sort of option of being like, is it on the left? Is it on the timeline? Is it on both? That would be one way that they could do that.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Awesome, thank you. Okay, that concludes today's show. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Christiana, thank you for joining us. And for all of you watching, we will be back next week for our final episode of the season. See you all then. Yeah.